The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered concrete floor of Master Chen's traditional karate academy in downtown Los Angeles. The year was 1975, and karate had found its place in American culture, though not everyone understood its true meaning. The dojo walls bore the marks of countless training sessions, with faded photographs of tournaments and demonstrations from the early days when karate first arrived with returning servicemen. Sensei David Mitchell, a third-degree black belt with 15 years of dedicated training, was leading the advanced class through kata practice. His crisp white GI moved flawlessly through each technique, the black belt around his waist representing years of discipline and sacrifice. At 32, he had earned his rank through traditional methods, training under Master Chen himself, who had studied in Okinawa before bringing authentic karate to California. The sound of shouting from the parking lot interrupted the peaceful rhythm of training. Through the large windows that faced the street, Mitchell could see a commotion brewing. 3 older teenagers, probably around 17 or 18, had cornered a younger boy near the chain-link fence that separated the dojo property from the alley. "Hey, karate boy," one of the bullies called out mockingly. "Why don't you show us some of those fancy moves?" The boy they surrounded could not have been more than 14. His karate gi was unmistakably worn and patched, with visible repairs along the sleeves and a large tear across the back that had been carefully sewn together with mismatched thread. The white fabric had turned slightly grey from countless washings, and the orange belt around his waist was frayed at the edges. Mitchell paused his instruction and moved closer to the window. The other students noticed their sensei's attention shift and quietly gathered behind him. What they witnessed challenged everything they thought they knew about strength and character. The young boy, despite being outnumbered and clearly intimidated, stood his ground. His stance was textbook perfect, feet positioned exactly as taught in basic training. His hands were raised in a defensive position, not aggressive, but ready. There was something in his posture that spoke of real training, not the flashy moves popularized by recent movies. "I don't want any trouble," the boy said calmly, his voice steady despite the obvious threat. "Please just let me pass." The largest of the 3 bullies stepped forward, easily 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier than the young karateka. "What's wrong with your uniform, kid? Can't afford a real one. Maybe karate isn't for poor kids like you?" Mitchell felt his jaw tighten. He had seen enough, but as he moved toward the door, something made him pause. The boy's response stopped everyone in their tracks. "This GI belonged to my father," the young man said with quiet dignity. "He wore it when he trained in Okinawa with Master Funakoshi's students before the war. He taught me that a GI doesn't make a karateka strong. The spirit inside does." The bullies laughed, but their laughter seemed forced now. There was something about the boy's demeanor that was unsettling them. He showed no fear, no anger, just calm resolution. "Your dad probably made that up to make you feel better about wearing rags," the second bully taunted. Without warning, the largest boy swung a wild haymaker at the young karateka's head. What happened next would change Mitchell's understanding of what it meant to be strong. The boy moved with fluid precision, stepping offline and redirecting the punch with a gentle but effective parry. As the bully stumbled forward from his own momentum, the young karateka could have easily countered with a devastating strike. Instead, he simply stepped aside and let the bigger boy regain his balance. "I don't want to hurt you," the boy said sincerely. This act of restraint seemed to infuriate the bullies more than any aggressive response would have. They began to circle him like wolves, but the young karateka simply adjusted his position to keep them all in view, never turning his back on any potential threat. Mitchell realized he was witnessing something rare in American karate culture of the mid-70s. Most students were drawn to the martial arts by the excitement of movies and tournaments, seeking quick techniques and flashy demonstrations. But this boy understood something deeper, something that many black belts never learned. As the confrontation continued, Mitchell noticed details about the young man's technique that spoke of authentic training. His breathing remained controlled. His movements were economical and purposeful. Most importantly, he showed the kind of restraint that only came from understanding the true responsibility that came with martial arts knowledge. The torn GI that the bullies mocked told a story of dedication and heritage, while other students in the dojo wore brand new uniforms purchased from martial arts supply catalogs. This boy wore the history of karate itself. The afternoon sun continued to cast its golden light through the dojo windows, as Mitchell prepared to step outside. But first, he wanted to see how this young warrior would handle himself. Something told him that this encounter would teach his advanced students more about karate than any formal lesson ever could. The boy in the torn GI stood ready, not for battle, but for whatever test of character was about to unfold. And in that moment, Mitchell understood that he was about to witness a demonstration of strength that had nothing to do with physical power. The situation in the parking lot escalated quickly. The three bullies had surrounded the young boy in the torn GI more tightly now, their initial amusement turning to frustration. They had expected him to either run away in fear or lash out in anger. Instead, they faced something they did not understand: complete composure in the face of aggression. Sensei Mitchell stepped outside, his advanced students following at a respectful distance. The warm afternoon air carried the sounds of traffic from nearby Sunset Boulevard, where the martial arts boom of the 70s had brought both authentic dojos and commercial schools to the sprawling city of Los Angeles. What seems to be the problem here? Mitchell's voice cut through the tension with quiet authority. The largest bully turned toward him, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "No problem, man. Just having a conversation with Karate Boy here about his fancy costume." The young boy's eyes met Mitchell's briefly, and in that glance, the sensei saw something remarkable. There was no plea for help, no relief at being rescued. The boy was prepared to handle this situation himself, regardless of the consequences. "My name is Tommy," the young man said respectfully to Mitchell, then turned back to his tormentors. "And I've already explained that I don't want any trouble." The second bully, emboldened by his friend's continued aggression, decided to test the young karateka further. "Yeah, well, maybe trouble wants you." He lunged forward with a grabbing motion, attempting to seize Tommy's GI. What happened next demonstrated the difference between authentic karate training and the flashy techniques popularized by recent movies. Tommy's response was textbook Shotokan, executed with the precision that only came from years of dedicated practice. He stepped back into a perfect cat stance, lowering his center of gravity while simultaneously executing an age-uke, a rising block that deflected the grabbing hands upward and away from his body. But it was what he did not do that impressed Mitchell the most. With his attacker off balance and vulnerable, Tommy could have easily followed up with a devastating counterattack. A reverse punch to the solar plexus, a knee strike to the ribs, an elbow to the head. Any of these techniques would have ended the confrontation immediately. Instead, Tommy simply reset to his ready position and waited. "I don't want to hurt you," he repeated, his voice carrying the same calm dignity as before. Mitchell recognized the restraint immediately. This was what Master Chen had taught him years ago during his own training. That true strength was not the ability to defeat an opponent, but the wisdom to know when such defeat was unnecessary. The third bully, who had been hanging back, now stepped forward with renewed aggression. "You think you're tough because you know some moves? Let's see how tough you are." He swung a wild haymaker, similar to his friend's earlier attempt, but with more commitment and force behind it. Tommy's response revealed years of kumite practice, the kind of sparring that had been developed in the traditional dojos of the early 70s. Using perfect timing and distance, Tommy employed a technique called tai sabaki, body movement that took him offline while simultaneously positioning him for a counterattack. As the punch whistled past his ear, he could have easily struck his attacker's exposed ribs or delivered a decisive blow to the back of the head. Once again, he chose restraint. The advanced students from Mitchell's dojo watched in fascination. They had been training for years, some of them competing in tournaments throughout Southern California. They knew hundreds of techniques, practiced kata with precision, and could break boards with devastating power, yet none of them possessed what they were witnessing in this young boy with the patched GI. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Mitchell asked, stepping closer to the group. Tommy's eyes never left his potential attackers, but he answered with the same respectful tone he had maintained throughout the confrontation. "My father taught me the basics before he died. After that, I've been training at a small dojo in East LA with Sensei Rodriguez. He studied in Okinawa in the 50s. Mitchell nodded. He knew of Rodriguez, one of the old-school instructors who had learned karate during the post-war period, when American servicemen were first introduced to authentic Okinawan martial arts. These instructors taught a different kind of karate than what had become popular in many American schools. The bullies were becoming increasingly frustrated. Their victim refused to be victimized. He would not run, would not fight back with anger, and would not be intimidated. This was not how these confrontations were supposed to go. "You're just lucky your teacher showed up," the first bully said, looking for a face-saving way to end the encounter. "Sensei Mitchell isn't my teacher," Tommy replied quietly. "I don't even know him, but I respect him as a fellow karateka." The simple dignity of this statement hit everyone present. Here was a boy who understood that the bond between martial artists transcended individual dojos, styles, or circumstances. In an era when many schools promoted competition and rivalry, Tommy embodied the traditional values that had been the foundation of karate for centuries. Mitchell made a decision that would change both his life and Tommy's. "Young man," he said formally, "would you be interested in training with us? We could use someone who understands what karate really means." The bullies, sensing that their opportunity for easy intimidation had passed, began to back away. But their leader had one more taunt to deliver. "Whatever, karate boy. Keep wearing daddy's old rags. See if we care." Tommy's response would stay with Mitchell for the rest of his life. "My father wore this gi with honor," the young man said simply. "If I can do the same, then it has served its purpose." As the bullies finally departed, Mitchell looked at the torn and patched gi with new eyes. What he had initially seen as a sign of poverty, he now understood as a symbol of heritage, dedication, and authentic martial arts values that were becoming increasingly rare in American karate. The afternoon sun was beginning to set behind the palm trees that lined the street, casting long shadows across the dojo parking lot. But for Mitchell and his students, this day had brought an illumination that had nothing to do with light. They had witnessed true strength, and it looked nothing like what they had expected. 2 weeks had passed since Tommy first walked through the doors of Master Chen's traditional karate academy. The boy who had worn the torn gi with such dignity in the parking lot that fateful afternoon now stood among the advanced students, his uniform still patched but immaculately clean. Mitchell watched as Tommy moved through the basic kata with precision that spoke of years of dedicated practice, while other students struggled with the subtle timing and breathing patterns required for proper execution. Tommy's movements flowed with the natural rhythm that only came from understanding the deeper principles behind each technique. "Your form is excellent," Mitchell said during a brief break in training. "Tell me more about your father's training in Okinawa." Tommy's eyes took on a distant quality as he spoke. He served there from 1950 to 1952 during the occupation. He said the Okinawan masters were still teaching the old ways then, before karate became commercialized. "My father trained under a man named Miyagi, who emphasized that karate was never meant to be about fighting, but about building character." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. He had heard stories from Master Chen about the old Okinawan masters, men who had preserved the authentic teachings through decades of cultural change and modernization. These masters understood that true karate was a way of life, not merely a collection of fighting techniques. The afternoon training session was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Through the front door walked a man Mitchell recognized immediately: Frank Patterson, a successful tournament competitor who owned 3 commercial karate schools in the San Fernando Valley. Patterson was everything that represented the changing face of American karate in the mid-70s. His schools emphasized trophy-winning, flashy techniques and rapid promotion through the belt ranks. Students could earn their black belts in 18 months by paying for accelerated programs and attending weekend seminars. "Dave," Patterson called out familiarly, using Mitchell's first name despite their limited relationship. "I heard you picked up a new student with some interesting skills." Mitchell felt his jaw tighten slightly. Word traveled fast in the Los Angeles karate community, and he suspected Patterson's visit was not entirely social. "We have many dedicated students here," Mitchell replied diplomatically. Patterson's eyes scanned the training floor until they settled on Tommy, who was practicing makiwara board striking with focused intensity. The heavy canvas wrapped around the striking post showed signs of regular use, and Tommy's punches landed with the distinctive sound that indicated proper technique and conditioning. "That must be the kid everyone's talking about," Patterson said with a thin smile. "I heard he had some trouble with some local boys a couple weeks ago." The other students had stopped their individual practice to listen to the conversation. In the close-knit world of traditional karate, any visit from someone like Patterson was significant news. Tommy finished his makiwara practice and approached respectfully, bowing to both Mitchell and the visitor. His torn GI looked even more humble next to Patterson's expensive embroidered uniform with its multiple patches advertising tournament victories and association memberships. "This is Tommy Nakamura," Mitchell said formally. "Tommy, this is Mr. Patterson. He runs several schools in the valley. Pleased to meet you." "Yes, sir," Tommy said with genuine respect, despite clearly sensing the tension in the room. Patterson looked Tommy up and down appraisingly, taking in the patched GI and worn orange belt. "I understand you've got some natural talent, kid. How would you like to train at a real facility? We've got modern equipment, tournament teams, and I could have you testing for your black belt within 2 years." The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Patterson's schools were known for their success in sport karate competition, and many young martial artists would have jumped at such an opportunity. Tommy's response revealed the depth of his understanding about what karate truly meant. "Thank you for the offer, sir, but I'm very happy training here. Sensei Mitchell and Master Chen teach the same principles my father learned in Okinawa. I'm not interested in rushing through belt rankings or competing for trophies." Patterson's smile became more predatory. "That's a noble attitude, kid, but trophies pay the bills. Traditional karate is fine for meditation and exercise, but if you want to see what real karate looks like, you should come watch my students compete next month at the Long Beach tournament." Mitchell felt his students' attention sharpen. The Long Beach International Karate Tournament was the most prestigious martial arts competition on the West Coast, featuring competitors from dozens of styles and schools. "Perhaps," Patterson continued, "you'd like to put that traditional training to the test against some modern competition?" The challenge was unmistakable now. Patterson was questioning not just Tommy's abilities, but the entire philosophy of traditional karate training that Master Chen's academy represented. Tommy looked to Mitchell, who gave him a slight nod of permission to respond for himself. "My father taught me that the real test of karate isn't against other martial artists in competition," Tommy said quietly. "It's against the challenges of daily life, learning patience instead of anger, showing restraint instead of aggression, building others up instead of tearing them down." The wisdom in these words, coming from a 14-year-old boy, created a moment of profound silence in the dojo. Even Patterson seemed momentarily taken aback by the maturity of the response. But the commercial karate instructor recovered quickly. "That's very philosophical, son. But philosophy doesn't mean much if you can't back it up when it counts. My students learn to win, not just to talk about ancient principles." Mitchell had heard enough. "Mr. Patterson, we appreciate your visit, but our students are here to learn traditional karate, not to be recruited for tournament competition." Patterson shrugged, but his eyes remained fixed on Tommy. "The offer stands, kid. When you get tired of wearing rags and playing with old-fashioned ideas, come see me. I can turn you into a champion." After Patterson left, the dojo seemed to exhale collectively. The students resumed their individual practice, but Mitchell could sense that something had changed. A line had been drawn between two very different approaches to martial arts training. Tommy returned to the makiwara, but Mitchell noticed that his strikes now carried a different quality. There was no anger or frustration, but there was a deepened resolve, as if the encounter had crystallized something important in the young man's understanding. As the afternoon training session continued, Mitchell realized that Tommy had just demonstrated something more valuable than any tournament victory. He had shown that true strength came not from defeating opponents, but from remaining true to one's principles, even when challenged. The torn GI that Patterson had mocked with his comment about rags suddenly seemed to Mitchell like a banner of honor, representing values that were becoming increasingly rare in the rapidly commercializing world of American karate. In that moment, Mitchell understood that he was not just training Tommy in martial arts techniques. He was helping to preserve something precious that was in danger of being lost forever: the authentic spirit of traditional karate. 3 months after Frank Patterson's visit to the dojo, the Long Beach International Karate Championships had arrived. The tournament, held at the Queen Mary Hotel complex, drew competitors from across the United States and around the world. In 1975, it was the most prestigious martial arts competition on the West Coast, featuring both traditional forms competition and the increasingly popular point fighting format. Mitchell had not planned to attend, but Master Chen had insisted that Tommy be exposed to the broader karate community, even if only as an observer. "A student must see all aspects of the martial arts world," the elderly master had explained. "Only then can he truly appreciate the path we have chosen." The convention center buzzed with activity, as hundreds of competitors warmed up for their divisions. The air was thick with the sounds of kiais, the sharp crack of breaking boards, and the constant chatter of spectators and competitors. Vendors lined the hallways, selling everything from martial arts weapons to embroidered patches advertising various schools and systems. Tommy walked beside Mitchell, his eyes taking in the spectacle with quiet interest. His tournament gi was still the same patched uniform he wore to daily training, but it had been carefully cleaned and pressed for the occasion. Among the sea of brand new uniforms with school patches and sponsor logos, his simple appearance drew curious glances. "There's our friend," Mitchell said quietly, nodding toward a corner of the warm-up area where Frank Patterson was coaching a group of students through flashy kicking combinations. All of his competitors wore matching red and gold uniforms with elaborate patches advertising Patterson's Valley Karate Centers. One of Patterson's students, a 17-year-old brown belt named Rick Martinez, was particularly impressive. His kicks snapped with precision and power, and his forms demonstrated the kind of athletic ability that tournament judges favored. Martinez had already won several regional tournaments and was considered a strong contender in the youth division. "Sensei," Tommy said quietly, "why do their techniques look so different from what we practice?" Mitchell watched as Martinez executed a jumping, spinning kick that would have been impossible in traditional kata. "Tournament karate has evolved to emphasize techniques that score points with judges," he explained. "Speed, flash, and complexity often matter more than practical application." As they found seats in the spectator area, Patterson spotted them and approached with his characteristic, confident smile. He was accompanied by Martinez and 2 other students, all wearing their matching uniforms like a team uniform. "Dave, glad you could make it," Patterson said loudly enough to draw attention from nearby spectators. "And you brought the kid with the vintage GI. How's the traditional training going?" "Very well, thank you," Tommy replied respectfully before Mitchell could answer. Patterson's eyes gleamed with competitive interest. "You know, we still have some open spots in the youth division. The registration closes in an hour. What do you say, kid? Ready to see how traditional karate stacks up against modern competition?" The challenge was unmistakable, and several nearby competitors and spectators had stopped their conversations to listen. In the tournament world of 1975, any suggestion of a challenge between different approaches to karate quickly drew attention. Mitchell felt the familiar tension that came with these confrontations. "Tommy is here to observe and learn," he said diplomatically. "Come on, sensei," Martinez interjected with the brashness of youth. "Let him compete. It'll be educational." The comment drew chuckles from Patterson's other students, and Mitchell could see Tommy's jaw tighten slightly. But when the young man spoke, his voice remained calm and respectful. "I appreciate the opportunity," Tommy said, "but I'm not sure tournament competition aligns with my training goals." Patterson's smile became more predatory. "What's wrong? Afraid the old-fashioned methods won't hold up under pressure?" A small crowd had gathered now, sensing drama. Tournament settings always brought out the competitive tensions between different schools and approaches to martial arts training. Tommy looked to Mitchell, who gave him a slight nod of permission to make his own decision. The young man was quiet for a long moment, considering not just the immediate challenge but the broader implications of his choice. "If there's an open spot," Tommy finally said, "I'll compete, but I won't change my approach to try to impress judges. I'll demonstrate karate as I've been taught." The commitment in his voice surprised even Mitchell. This was not the response of a boy being goaded into competition, but of a young martial artist making a principled stand. Patterson's grin widened. "Excellent. Rick here can help you with the registration process. The youth division starts in 2 hours. As Patterson and his students walked away, Mitchell felt a mixture of pride and concern. Tommy had handled the challenge with maturity, but tournament fighting was very different from traditional training. The point fighting format rewarded different skills than those emphasized in authentic karate practice. "Are you sure about this?" Mitchell asked quietly. Tommy nodded, his expression serious but determined. "Sensei, you told me that my father's GI represents the true spirit of karate. If that's true, then it shouldn't matter whether I'm in a dojo or a tournament ring. The principles remain the same." The wisdom in this response reminded Mitchell why he had been so impressed with Tommy from their first meeting. The boy understood something that many adult martial artists never grasped, that authentic karate was not dependent on external circumstances, but on internal character. As they walked toward the registration table, Mitchell noticed other competitors and coaches watching Tommy with curiosity. His patched GI and calm demeanor stood out dramatically among the flashy uniforms and pre-competition bravado that characterized most tournament participants. The registration process was simple but revealing. When asked about his school affiliation, Tommy simply wrote "Traditional Karate" in the space provided. When asked about previous tournament experience, he wrote, "None." The tournament official, a middle-aged man with multiple referee patches on his shirt, looked at the form with raised eyebrows. "First tournament, son?" "Yes, sir," Tommy replied respectfully. "Well, you picked a big one to start with. The Long Beach Internationals draw some serious competition. You sure you're ready for this level?" Tommy's answer would stay with Mitchell for years to come. "Sir, I'm not here to win or lose. I'm here to represent the karate I've been taught with honor." The official stamped Tommy's registration card and handed him his competitor number. As they walked away from the table, Mitchell realized that the next few hours would test not just Tommy's martial arts skills, but everything he claimed to believe about the true meaning of karate training. The tournament floor buzzed with activity as competitors continued their warm-ups and preparation routines. But in the midst of all the noise and excitement, Tommy found a quiet corner and began the same simple warm-up routine he performed before every training session at the dojo. His movements were precise, purposeful, and completely focused. He was not preparing for a tournament. He was preparing to demonstrate authentic karate, regardless of the outcome. As Mitchell watched his student prepare, he understood that they were about to discover whether the traditional values they held so dear could survive the pressures of modern competition. The torn GI that had seemed so humble in the dojo parking lot 3 months ago now seemed like a banner of honor, representing everything that authentic martial arts training stood for. The real test of strength was about to begin. The youth division of the Long Beach International Karate Championships was held on a large competition floor marked with multiple fighting areas. The sounds of judges calling out scores and the sharp crack of techniques meeting protective gear filled the air as dozens of young competitors battled for regional and national recognition. Tommy sat quietly in the competitor seating area, watching the matches with the same focused attention he brought to cater practice. The tournament format was point fighting, where competitors scored by delivering controlled techniques to designated target areas. First fighter to reach 3 points would win the match. Mitchell observed his student's calm demeanor with growing admiration. While other competitors paced nervously or engaged in last-minute practice sessions, Tommy simply watched and learned. His torn GI looked even more humble, surrounded by the flashy uniforms and elaborate warm-up routines of his opponents. Frank Patterson's student, Rick Martinez, was dominating his division. His combination of athletic ability and tournament-specific training showed clearly as he scored decisive victories with flashy techniques that impressed both judges and spectators. His kicks snapped with precision, and his timing was excellent for the point-fighting format. First, call for Nakamura versus Johnson, the tournament director announced over the loudspeaker. Tommy's first opponent was a stocky 15-year-old from San Diego, whose school specialized in tournament competition. As they bowed to each other at the center of the fighting area, the contrast between their approaches was immediately apparent. Johnson bounced lightly on his feet, hands dancing in the modern tournament style that emphasized mobility and quick striking. Tommy stood in a classic ready position, feet planted solidly, hands positioned for both offense and defense in the traditional manner. The referee, an experienced tournament official, gave the standard commands. "Fighters ready? Hajime!" What followed was a demonstration of two completely different philosophies of karate, applied to the same competitive format. Johnson came out aggressively, launching a series of quick hand techniques designed to score fast points. But Tommy's response revealed the depth of his traditional training. Instead of trying to match his opponent's speed with flashy counters, he used precise distance and timing to avoid the attacks while setting up his own techniques. When Tommy finally attacked, it was with the kind of controlled power that came from years of Makiwara training and authentic kata practice. His reverse punch was perfectly timed and placed, striking Johnson's protective gear with a sound that echoed throughout the competition area. "Point. Red!" the referee called, awarding Tommy the first score. The crowd's reaction was immediate. This was not the kind of flashy technique they were accustomed to seeing in tournament competition, but its effectiveness was undeniable. Johnson responded with increased aggression, attempting a jumping sidekick that would have been spectacular if it had connected. But Tommy's traditional training had taught him to read an opponent's intentions, and he stepped offline with perfect timing, allowing the kick to miss completely while simultaneously delivering a controlled back fist that found its target. Point. Red! Came the call again. Mitchell found himself holding his breath. Tommy was not just winning, he was demonstrating that traditional karate principles could be effective even in the artificial environment of tournament competition. The third point came when Johnson, frustrated by his inability to score against Tommy's solid defense, committed to a wild combination attack. Tommy responded with what Master Chen had taught him was the essence of authentic karate: patience, timing, and decisive action at exactly the right moment. As Johnson's combination left him off balance and exposed, Tommy delivered a perfectly controlled technique that would have been devastating in a real confrontation, but was measured precisely for tournament rules. Point. Match! Red wins! The victory was clean and decisive. But what impressed Mitchell most was Tommy's behavior afterward. Instead of celebrating or showing any sign of arrogance, he bowed respectfully to his opponent and helped him adjust his protective gear, which had been displaced during the match. 3 more matches followed, each against increasingly skilled opponents as Tommy advanced through the elimination brackets. Each victory demonstrated the same principles: traditional techniques applied with perfect timing, defensive skills that came from authentic training, and the kind of mental composure that could only be developed through years of disciplined practice. By the time Tommy reached the finals, word had spread throughout the tournament about the young competitor in the patched gi who was defeating seasoned tournament fighters with classical karate techniques. His final opponent was Rick. Martinez Patterson's student was everything. Tommy was not. Flashy, aggressive, and perfectly trained for tournament competition. He had scored impressive victories throughout the day, demonstrating the kind of athletic karate that was becoming the standard in American competitions. As the 2 young men faced each other in the championship ring, the contrast could not have been more dramatic. Martinez in his pristine school uniform, representing the new direction of American karate. Tommy in his father's torn gi, representing the traditional values that had been the foundation of martial arts for centuries. The match began with Martinez immediately taking the offensive, using his superior reach and athletic ability to pressure Tommy with a barrage of techniques. But Tommy's response revealed the true lesson his journey had been teaching all along. Strength, he had learned, was not about overpowering opponents or impressing judges with flashy techniques. True strength was about remaining calm under pressure, staying true to one's principles even when challenged, and demonstrating the character that authentic martial arts training was supposed to develop. The final exchange of the match came when Martinez attempted his signature technique, a jumping spinning heel kick that had won him several tournaments. It was spectacular, athletic, and perfectly executed. Tommy's counter was simple, classical, and devastating in its effectiveness. Using the traditional principle of taisabaki, he stepped offline and delivered a reverse punch that found its target with perfect timing and control. Point. Match. Red wins the championship. The victory was important, but not for the reasons most people understood. Tommy had not just won a tournament, he had proven that the values his father's gi represented were not outdated relics, but timeless principles that remained relevant in any era. As Mitchell watched his student accept the small trophy with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout the day, he understood that they had all learned something profound about the true meaning of strength. Patterson approached them afterward. His attitude noticeably changed. "That was impressive, kid," he said with genuine respect. "Maybe there's something to be said for the old ways after all." Tommy's response was characteristic. "Thank you, sir, but the gi doesn't make the karateka. The training and the spirit do." As they left the tournament that evening, Mitchell realized that Tommy had taught him as much as he had taught Tommy. The torn gi that had seemed so humble in the dojo parking lot months ago now seemed like what it had always been, a symbol of authentic martial arts values that were worth preserving and defending. True strength, Mitchell now understood, was not about defeating opponents or winning competitions. It was about maintaining one's principles under pressure, showing respect even to those who showed none in return, and understanding that the real test of karate was not in tournament rings, but in the character it developed in daily life. The boy in the torn gi had taught them all what it really meant to be strong.